Hi everyone. I'm doing a little voiceover today on my video because I wanted to share with you how I created what you're seeing right now. This started as a Gelli Print, basic kind of one pull print that I did quite a while back, and I really don't even remember when I did it. But it was something that intrigued me and I really liked the look of it, and so I saved it. And I came across it the other day and thought I really need to do something with this Gelli Print. I really wanted to just impress on those of you who ask me quite often, what do you do with your Gelli Prints when you're finished with them? And this is just one example of what you can do with it. You will have a base to get started with rather than a blank piece of paper. You'll have colors on that Gelli Print. You know, you can just start with the colors that you have there in front of you rather than starting with a blank page. And you build off of that. And having something already started, to me, is a major plus. So I'm going to show you how I created this. The entire video is pretty much in a time-lapse mode, so it's fast-forwarded. But I wanted to go through and explain to you what I was doing when I created it, and maybe you can take from what I've done and pull out one of your Gelli Prints and do something similar. I think you will really enjoy it. So here's the Gelli Print, and I took some additional paints using some of the same colors you see there, and I rolled them on with a brayer. I did not record that portion, but you will see there's more color on the print in the next frame. I also took a stencil and put some purple stenciling in the background, and now I'm putting a little bit of white stenciling in with script stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. So I wasn't really thrilled with the way the white was showing up on the using the stencil, and so I decided, after I saw how those looked, I mean, they're okay, but it wasn't as much as what I was wanting on the page. So I decided to go ahead and do some scribbling with a Posca pen, which you'll see in a second. So I just scribbled some words and it's really nonsense nothings, but it looks really cool when you have that in the background. So I added a little bit of that, and you can see all that color now in the print too, where I added a lot of purples and greens and a little bit more of the turquoisey teal color. So, and I also kind of filled in the edges there where there was no color at all, because I wanted the page just to be completely filled. So then I got out some white paint and the next stencil to do the flowers, make those a little bit larger. Well, I didn't turn on the camera at the right time. Instead, I turned on the camera when I was using up the paint. So I went ahead and kept this in the video just so that you could see how I'm using my book I'm altering. And I'm just using up that white paint that was left over on one of the pages that already had some paint on it. And this is how I create those pages. Anytime I have extra paint, I'm adding them into the pages of this book. So that's an example of how that goes. I'm going to use that same stencil that I used to do the white, and I'm going to put orange on top of it. I did the white on purpose to block out the color that was underneath it so that I'd be able to see that orange in a vibrant kind of way. So I did all of the flowers. I just used 2 tones of orange paint, a darker and a lighter, just to give it a little bit of dimension so it's not flat looking. And later, I'm going to be adding another flower on top. You probably remember seeing that at the beginning. There's a red flower there. And then I realized I was going to be doing some stamping in the background, and it's stuff that I should have done before I started the flowers. It is easier to do all of your background before you start adding your focal points, but because I didn't, I made a little mask just to cover up the flowers if they were going to be in the way of where I was going to be stamping. And I just set them in place just in case, so that I didn't stamp over the top of my flowers that I had just stenciled on. And most of these products that I'm using in this video are in my Amazon store, where I have a lot of products that I use and recommend, so check that out. There's a link in the video in the description, and you can check that out if you're interested in any of these products. They may not all be there, but the majority of them probably are. And where I'm stamping those most recent green flowers, I do come back later and add a third one in, because, you know, I'm not crazy about even numbers. I get involved and I forget sometimes to look at what I'm doing, but I will come back and add one later. And I will also add thin little stems for those coming all the way down to the bottom of the page. And I'm using Faber-Castell pit pins to add the stems and such. And added a few more kind of weedy flowers in brown, just to fill in a little bit more at the bottom of the page. And now I'm adding a little bit of texture in the background, just with a little swirl stamp. I picked out one of the colors that was already in my background, and it's a little bit deeper shade of teal. And I just thought that would be fun and playful, using that mask once again to give me a place to get one behind a flower. And also some more background texture with this chicken wire stamp. I love this thing. All right, here's some more of my homemade foam stamps that like I created in the dessert morsel. I think it was number 6, and I made a little small one, smaller than the one I made in the morsel video, and just stamped it on a little dictionary page several times. I wasn't sure how many leaves I was going to need, so I just filled up the page and started cutting them out, and laid a couple on my project, and I realized, you know, I don't want all the leaves to be exactly the same size, and so I made another little stamp, even smaller, and just filled in the areas that didn't have, you know, stamps on them. I just filled in some more leaves there, and cut a bunch of those out, and started laying them on my project, and then gluing them down with the glue stick. Yes, I put it upside down. I had to turn it around. But I just love how it started looking. There's those red flowers that I mentioned, and like I said, they were on a Gelli Print, and I had stamped them. I was actually using that foam flower stamp and stamping it on the Gelli plate, and then stamping it off onto another Gelli Print. And those are the red flowers there that I cut out, and I wanted to place those on the top of the orange flowers. Then I have this really sweet little set of insect stamps that I wanted to use a couple of these on my project. The ink didn't come out as dark as I wanted it to, so you'll see me in a few minutes going back and putting some micron pen. I used a micron pen first, and then later I come back with a Posca pen and make that little caterpillar even darker, because I really wanted him to show up. added just a tiny bit of yellow to the bee's body so that you could tell more that he was a little bumblebee or a little honeybee. I'm not sure which one he is. This is a Wink of Stella brush that I'm going to use to add a little bit of shimmer to the wings of the bee, because they always look sort of iridescent when you see the wings of insects in the sunlight. And I think this is the perfect little pen to add just a tiny touch of shimmer. And I'll have a close-up of that in the at the end of the video, but here you can see how much it shines. Now that's wet, so it's not going to look quite that shiny when it's dry, but it does look shimmery, and I think that's really fun. It's a fun look. Okay, and here's where I'm going back in with the Posca pen and just making the little caterpillar's body a little bit darker and more, I don't know, just a deeper, more pigmented look to him. And there's your little close-up view. And here I'm just adding some little stamen and, you know, things for the center of the flowers, just to give them some more dimension and not look quite so flat. And I'm using Posca paint pens for those. A few dots with the orange, just filling it in. And a little bit of black in there too for some contrast. Then I decided that, of course, I wanted a little ladybug. I love little ladybugs on flowers. I think they look so, they just look so sweet. And a lot of times it adds just that little bright pop of red that you need on a page. And it's just a lot of fun. And the ladybug is such a simple thing to draw, so I tackled it and just made his little red body. And I used a micron pen again. This is a fine point micron. I love it. It's a 0.25. So it's a very tiny nib on it. Excuse me. And so I was able to make the really tiny details on the ladybug, the dots and the little legs and his little head. And it just, it's a great little pen to have in your stash. And here I'm using a white paint pen to, excuse me, to give a little bit of a highlight to the caterpillar. He's not shiny at all, but by putting a little bit of the paint pen on there and then kind of smudging it a little bit, it just gives the caterpillar a lighter color on top. Now that's a graphic pen. I used those once before in a video, and I mentioned that I would tell you guys how they worked. I bought that because it is a 0.5 nib, and I like the smaller nib, but this white one I do not like. In fact, I've got some color ones too, and they just don't work as well as the Posca pens. They flood a lot. So I kept, you notice I keep going off screen because I was having to, you know, wipe off the excess ink that is about to drip all over my page. And so I had to be real careful with those. So I don't really recommend those, just because I have not had a very good time with those. But I do love the Posca pens. They are nice, and they flood just a little bit when they get near their the end of their life. They will flood just a little at the end of their life, but for regular use all the time, they do not. So those are my preferred paint pens. All right, so I'm doing a little bit of outlining. This pen is the Uniball I, and it's permanent when it's dry, and you know, I like that about most of my pens. I like the fact that they're permanent, so that I can seal the page if I choose, you know, and use like a coat of Mod Podge or Collage Podge, or you know, any of the sealers, and my project isn't ruined because they don't smear once they get wet again, where they don't reactivate. So I like that, and this is the Uniball I, and does a really good job. Now back to the Posca pen here, and I'm doing the wavy lettering like I did in one of my morsel videos back in 2016, one of the appetizers. And it's a fun way to add some words or a quote, or just any kind of sentiment or journaling. It's just a fun way to do it. And so I wanted to have a phrase go all the way across the top of the page because there was a lot of room at the top. And so I chose this this little saying that, you know, we've all heard before: always take the scenic route. And I thought it was perfect for this little, you know, picture of little wildflowers. And I penciled it in first, and I penciled in my wavy lines also. And then once I'm done with all of the inking, then I go back and erase my wavy lines. But I used a black Posca pen, and then later you'll see that I go over it. I outline all of the black letters with a white Posca pen so that they will show up better on that busy background. Here I'm just thickening up the letters. A lot of you ask me about the Posca pens I use, and the ones I use the most are the extra fine point ones. I do have some of the other sizes too, but I will mostly go to the extra fine point just because I like, I do so much detail work, so I really like having the smaller nib. And I do have some of the larger ones just for when I need, you know, something to make a bigger line or a thicker line. So, and then back to using a Faber-Castell Pitt pen, the big brush pen here, for some edging on my sheet there. So I decided that the page looked a little bit too dark, especially after I had put the lettering at the top and outlined it in white. So I decided to bring some more white down into the page. And I decided to outline the flowers again in white, and this time I used a Gelli roll pen because it has a smaller nib than the Posca paint pen has. And I really like the way the flowers are standing out now, and they look like they're a little bit separate from the background, a little bit more separate. And I just really like the way it looks now. I was very happy with that. The next thing I'm going to be adding, I used a sheet, full sheet label, and I took a Fisker's border punch, and I punched out a little lattice piece, and attached it to the very bottom edge of the page, and I used the label because it had the adhesive on it already. So I just punched out the lattice work and trimmed off the excess, and love the way that was such an easy thing to add a little bit of extra interest to the page. So that's my little page, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll keep in mind that you can do something like this on a Gelli Print by itself to add into a book. You can do it in an art journal, on an art journal page, on a canvas, a regular canvas, a wood canvas. You can put a decoration like this on an altered box. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So just don't forget to use those painted papers and Gelli prints, and have some fun. We'll see you on the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.